When we look at the bag tag project, the first thing we're going to do is start to case that leather up. Remember, that's just getting our moisture content right in there. We go into depth about that in our other videos as well. But we're going to get that cased, and when I think about what pattern we want to do on this, I wanted to show you guys one of the patterns in the book, but kind of putting our tweak on it a little bit, because I think a bag tag of sorts, you're going to be putting some sort of identification on, usually somebody's initials or brand, whether this is something somebody's ordering from you or you're giving it as a gift or even doing it for yourself. You're probably going to want some initials on there. Now, we look at pattern out of the book, the book that comes with the Explore Leathercraft Kit. This tag here with initials in there, I think that's a great design. Puts a nice little border on that, some texturing in there. We're going to walk through how to do both of those things. But the initials themselves, if these aren't your initials, then hey, we're going to have to find some new ones, right? So there's a few different ways to do that. Now, just like I'm going to take this vellum, this tracing paper that we have, and I'm going to put down here, I'm going to just trace the outline roughly of our tag. Now, one thing you can do for especially initials is you can jump on your computer and print out, you just check with your font size, but print out different initials from there and you can trace right around those. But on here, I'm going to mark our center camouflage line on both of those. So that just kind of gives me a rough idea across here on where my border is going to be for my initials in there. Now, I'm going to set that aside because that's all I need for my transfer pattern. But for the initials themselves, now let's look at that. Now my initials, Joe Mealy, and I'm going to be JM. I'm going to show you just how I would sketch these out if I was just going to do that. So we're going to make it just plain block letters here. But I start just writing them out. Kind of a single line like you would normally write. Okay, now from there, I can work to create the block letters. Now some of you might be very artistic and can do different lettering and drawing stuff really easy. So you might be way more advanced than this even. And that's great. Anything you can draw, you can transfer that onto leather. But for those of you looking for an easy way here, I kind of use that initial line that I put down as my main skeleton of that initial or those letters, and then build around it from there. So we get a pretty decent set of initials here. They kind of shifted on me a little bit to the right, it seems like, as I was doing that for my whole tag. So that's not a problem. When I put my tag back underneath here now to transfer that pattern, my initials that I drew on there kind of shifted, so I'm just going to shift that paper over a little bit to where I feel like those are centered up good on my project. Now we're going to simply trace that line off onto our leather that's been cased up. Remember, you can't transfer lines onto dry leather. You're going to barely see a line and have to push really hard for it. So that's not going to work out very good. So make sure that leather's cased up when we do this. Okay, and then making sure we are centered on our tag now. I'm just going to put my little marks there that I marked for our center camouflage marks. All right, now I transfer that, or move that transfer paper off of there. Let's look on how we're going to fill out the rest of this pattern. Now, I'm going to reach over and we're going to get our swivel knife out. I'm going to pull my initial cuts on this letter with my swivel knife. Excuse me. So I'm going to put that in my line, making sure I'm keeping that straight up and down. I don't want to have it tip to the side. Most times people are tipping it because they want to see that better. If you want to see it better, move your head off to the side so you can keep that knife up where it needs to be. So I'm going to tip that forward away from me a little bit, putting pressure down. Pull that knife straight down, pull those cuts. I'm turning that leather as I'm cutting because I always want my knife to be pulling towards me. I can see my line better and I have better control over my knife as I do that. So I'm just pulling along all those cuts as we go there. Now I'm not worried about connecting those points with my knife so much. I can do that as we go to our next tool and we bevel those out. Now we get on the inside of this J, we're getting a little bit of a tighter curve there. So I'm going to get things prepared so I can make a nice smooth cut around here, turning that knife as I go. If I need to stop and move that leather, I can. All right, there we go. We have initials laid out on there now. So the next thing with our initials is going to be to bevel those. So grabbing our bevel, this one here is textured on the side. We got our straight edge on that side, and then it's beveled up here, so we have an angle there. We want that angle going out away from us. So we're going to put this straight edge right in the line, and with that shadowing going out away. See, so we're shadowing away from our letters. We want our letters standing up. Now, when we get to the inside of this curve, that gets pretty tight for that size of bevel, right? Depending on your carving or your initials, you might have some tight curves in there. If you have some tight curves, watch this. This is kind of one of those exceptions people don't tell you about. We can tip this tool a little bit to get around there. Now, there's more tools you can get. You can get smaller bevels. You can always get more tools, right? But I'm showing you how to get by with the tools you have. So by tipping that tool a little bit, we were able to get around that inside curve without chewing up that leather where we didn't want to. Now we're coming around the outside of this line here. Again, I'm keeping that bevel straight up and down. The only time we're tipping that is if we're bending the rules to get around a little tight curve on the inside there. And I'm not tipping forward or back, we're straight up and down that way. You see how as I tap that tool, every time I'm tapping it, I'm moving it slightly, and I'm not just dragging it across there. I hit and it actually picks up out of the leather just a little bit to come across there. Keep turning that leather so that way my flat side of that bevel's towards me. I can always see it in that line. If I'm trying to bevel this line and I have that bevel turn this way, I can't see where I'm going, and it's easy to jump over that line where I don't want it to be. So that's why I turn that leather, position it so you can see things really well. All right, set that bevel aside. We're done with that tool. We're going to go back and grab our camouflage tool. This one here, we marked where those first ones were going to go. So I'm going to set that tool in place, straight up and down, making sure we get our burnish that we want, so we're hitting that hard enough. Now I'm going to go across each direction here. Now I think we're close enough to the borders that I can eyeball across a straight line. Now if you're not comfortable with that, go ahead and grab your paper. We can get a straight line scribed across there. I can just use my edge of my swivel knife even to kind of put that guideline down there if you need to have a guideline. Now put the side of that tool right back in where it just hit at. Same thing, the edge of that tool is going to come and just overlap. We'll move out the other way. Turn that project around, come back up to the top here. Do the same thing. This one I'm just going to eyeball across. Next we're going to grab our pear shader. Now this one I'm going to put down inside each of those camouflages, but I'm going to tip it back to me a little bit. We've used this before, hitting it flat. Now we're going to tip it back. By tipping it back, we kind of fade off and shorten the impression that that's making out there, so it's not as long of an impression. We're using this really as just an accent tool in here. We're getting to have a pretty good tag put together here. The last tool that we're going to use is a background tool. This is the one that's textured on the end there, but it's flat across there. So we're going to take this, I'm going to start by just going around our letters here. And one of the big keys on this tool is that we're keeping it flat. If I'm tipping it, we're going to see different impressions in there. My leather's starting to curl, so I'm just going to flatten that out a little bit. I want to be consistent with how hard I'm hitting this tool. Again, because we want nice and even coloring throughout this. I just walk this tool along here. As I get towards this camouflage at the end, kind of fade that out a little bit. I don't want to mash down over top of our camouflages. Now little projects like this, they want to move around on you a lot. That's where it's important to keep that pinky down there, keep that anchored as you're hitting that tool. Now it's moving a little bit in between hits, and that's okay because I'm moving that tool, but as that tool strikes down, it's staying in place. We have a little bit more texturing to do here. Using that background tool, we'll keep working our way around this side. Now that we have that backgrounding and texturing done, this project's ready to set aside and wait for our final finish, and we'll pick that up in our last video on finishing and adding our color and stain.